A real pleasure to welcome to Cinephile the great Jay Baruchel. His new documentary is called Celtic Soul. I encourage you to check it out. We'll talk to Jay all about it, but his credits also include the hysterical This Is the End, How to Train Your Dragon, Goon 1 and 2, Tropic Thunder, $1 Million Baby. He does it all, and he's a huge sports fan, particularly the Montreal Canadiens. Jay, thanks so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
So I grew up in Kingston. I was born in Toronto. I grew up in Kingston. One of my best friends, Jeff Lovelock's a diehard Montreal Canadiens fan. So whenever when I saw This Is the End, I was so happy because I know you're such a huge Habs fan, and immediately your character's, of course, repping Montreal. So now you're the favorite actor of him and so many others. But before we get to that movie specifically, how did a Canadian make it big in Hollywood? I know that, listen, we're known for being funny, and we've got a great lineage of comedians, but how did you specifically make that transition?
Well, in my case, it was down to sort of two gigs that I got. One was I had sort of two scenes in this movie, Almost Famous, that came out back in 98 or 99. I was in grade 11 in Montreal when I got that job, and they flew me and my mom down to LA and then New York, and I got to work with a bunch of really amazing actors and be directed by Cameron Crowe, and he's kind of the guy that found me up here. Basically, flash forward a year or two, and I'm in CEGEP in Montreal, and twiddling my thumbs, sort of going through the motions, not real psyched about being there, and got a phone call at home at my mom's house from a casting director in LA who had seen me in Almost Famous and was casting a show that at that point was called the Untitled Judd Apatow Project, which would then go on to become Undeclared, a TV show called Undeclared, and that was kind of the start of all of it. And I went from being a pasty-faced 18-year-old CEGEP student in Montreal to a pasty-faced 18-year-old lead of an American network TV show in a matter of days. So I'd say it kind of all started with that.
I love the grade 11 reference, telltale sign that you're Canadian, and also the fact that, like you said, if you mention French immersion, I'm really going to feel like I'm at home again. But getting hooked up with Judd and those guys, like that's what I find fascinating. Seth Rogen, fellow Canadian, I believe he's from Vancouver, but the fact that once you got, it's interesting, right? Like you look back now and go, well, yeah, you guys are so talented and so funny, and Judd's brilliant, and you and Franco and Rogen, like, yeah, I got it. Like, how could that not work? But it seems fortuitous now to say, if that didn't happen, where would your career path have landed, right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely. So it's weird. I didn't expect. I thought I'd have quit acting at that point because I started when I was 12 and I was doing a bunch of like kid shows in Canada from the age of like 12 onwards. But my goal was always to be a director. And so I figured at 18, as the work kind of started to dry up for me back home, because I was like no longer anything close to a cute kid. And nothing remotely resembling a man. It was just sort of a weird, in this sort of pubescent nether region of my life. And so I figured if I had any money saved up, however much money I had saved up, I'd take it and hopefully go to film school and then find a gig working at a video store and then just write movies, write action movies and horror movies in my spare time. That's kind of where I thought I'd end up being. And yeah, it was pretty profound shift in my life and moment in my life to get that gig and to get to work with all those people. And I'm 36 now, and we did the pilot of Undeclared when I was 18, and it was a pretty neat looking back with hindsight at who all was around in those days.
Well, you mentioned the fact that you worked with Cameron Crowe, Almost Famous. It's interesting because it's only after I'd seen This Is the End that I remembered. I'm like, oh my God, Jay Baruchel's $1 Million Baby. Like I went back and you were great in that movie. And that movie won Best Picture and working with Clint. And I mean, I couldn't imagine for you at that point to work with Clint and Morgan Freeman and Hilary Swank. And that's a tough character to play, right? Because you could fall in this trap of playing this simple guy who's this, he's made fun of and ridiculed. But there's a lot of heart to that character in that movie. Tell me about that experience.
Thanks, man. That was nice of you to say. It was a pretty big one. That was a pretty. There are every audition is big, but then there are certain ones that are like especially big. And when you have the chance to maybe get hired by Clint Eastwood, that's a huge one. And I remembered, I just sort of like, when I heard the character was meant to be from Texas, I breathed a sigh of relief because in like 1979, 1980, my mom's sister moved down to Texas and got married and had had 3 sons, and the eldest of which is only like maybe a year younger than me. So this is all to say that I've grown up around that accent throughout my life, and so I was like, I feel like I can figure this guy out. And I remember auditioning for it and being the only guy in the waiting room that wasn't wearing like workout clothes. Like, so some people seem to think like if you're auditioning for a construction worker, you have to show up in a hard hat, you know. And so there was all these guys in hoodies and shorts with towels around their necks, and I was like, I didn't get that email. I don't know if this bodes well. Yeah, either I'm a huge or all of them are. And then I auditioned and then I didn't hear anything for months and months, and I just assumed, oh, that's that. And then I was at a friend of mine's house in Montreal, and him and his brother, their parents were away, and they were in the process of rendering some rotten weed into hash oil on their stovetop when I got a phone call from my agent in the States saying, hey, you like Mystic River? Do you want to be in Clint's next movie? And I was like, holy. And then all of a sudden there I was on set with Clint Eastwood and Morgan Freeman, and for whatever reason, I'm anxious in all aspects of my life except for on set, and except for that day, because I was very, very scared, because I was like I said, there's Morgan Freeman and there's Hilary Swank and there's Clint Eastwood, and you know, I was scared because I was overcome with this like real strong sense of I don't want to screw this up, because you know, no person that I've ever worked for up to that point or since would be half as impressive to my granddad as Clint Eastwood. And you know, my granddad passed away in '92, and you know, I'm a big fan of David Cronenberg and Cameron Crowe and Judd Apatow and Ben Stiller, and I like, you know, I'm a massive fan of all these guys, and I've been blessed to work with all of them. But the only person that would have been like, holy crap, to my granddad was Clint Eastwood. And so this is all to say, like, I really don't want to screw this up. And but I learned so much on that first day, because after every take, I'd say, was that all right, sir? Was that all right, sir? And he'd always say, yeah, it was fine. Yeah, it was fine. And I'm like, ah, and like I started imagining the scenario behind the scenes of a flurry of phone calls of like, where the hell did we find this kid? Find me someone who knows what the hell they're doing. And then I guess Morgan Freeman saw me kind of stressing out a bit, and he leaned over and said, if he doesn't say anything, it means he likes it. And I was like, oh, that's right, because he's the director. What difference does it make how I feel? Like, if he's hired me and he's hired all of us and he thinks we've done the job he's hired us to do, that's that. And that really saved me and allowed me to keep acting for years and years and years, because I just sort of like understood this profound truth that all I need to do is trust the director. And a lot of actors have a tendency to keep asking for takes and, oh, I can get there. I know I can do better. I know I can do it. Well, if the person who's editing and shooting and envisioning the entire thing thinks you've done what they need you to do, that should be the end of it. So, yeah, it was pretty incredible, man.
And one of the coolest things I've heard about Clint as a director is that he doesn't say action, right? He just says whenever you're ready, which I think is a cool thing.
Yeah, and bare minimum of rehearsal. You know, you rehearse the scene or block it maybe twice tops, and then he averages around 3 takes per shot, and so it's a really like, he just has complete trust in the people, in himself and the people that he's put together on any given set, and there's no need to belabor stuff if he knows that he's gotten the moment that he needs. And I think that a lot of people when you're on a set and there goes north of 7-10 takes plus, it sort of is it's hard not to assume that means that the person doesn't know what the director doesn't know what they're looking for. And Eastwood is a living master, one of the greatest living masters in cinema. And so to get to be there, and yeah, it's an incredibly rewarding process, but also a really palatable one, because you get there at like 9 a.m., 9:30, which is really reasonable. And I was eating supper in my hotel room by 7 every single night. Like, they finished that movie 3 days or 2 days ahead of schedule, which is just unheard of. So yeah, one of the greatest, most edifying, important working experiences of my life.
Oh, it's really well expressed. We're talking with Jay Baruchel, his new documentary, Celtic Soul. I encourage you all to check it out. Speaking of, by the way, first off, we got to get this to Michael Mann, because if one take works, he'll do 53 takes. So he's going to figure out how to shorten this down. Hank Azaria was like, dude, it was unbelievable on Heat. He wouldn't stop. I'm like, come on, man, we're good. I just read Nick Nolte's book, and you mentioned Ben Stiller. He said Tropic Thunder was crazy because if you're going to make a movie satirizing Vietnam, you end up actually making a war film. And it actually, with the pyrotechnics and all that going on there, it wasn't necessarily, and Nick said it was a fun experience because Ben's so great and you guys are all good actors, but he goes, it was intense. It was like making Platoon because you're making fun of Platoon.
Oh yeah, 100%. They spared nothing, and on that movie, Ben and everyone took the action as seriously as anything else, and that's why I think it is as strong and sturdy as it is, and why I don't know that I can't name a whole bunch of other movies that I'm confident to say will be just as relevant 20 years from now as they are today. You know, I think it'll be one of those classics that'll be on TV forever. And part of that is the like painstaking care that was made, that it was made with, you know, like that we shot that movie for over 6 months. You know, we treated it like an epic, and to that end, you know, Ben hired John Toll, who shot Thin Red Line and Braveheart, and so the movie and all of the pyrotechnics and the gunplay, and almost all of that is practical, old school practical Apocalypse Now style as well. And my first day of work on that movie, we were shooting the opening kind of battle sequence that opens opens the movie, and we had 50 stunt performers, 50 extras, 24 actors, 2 practical Huey helicopters, and the whole thing was just covered in squibs. And it was, man, it was like the most fun I've ever had on a film set. No. It's like, it was such a combination of everything I love. You know, I grew up playing cops and robbers and playing Army when I was a kid, playing G.I. Joe, and here I was getting to do it as a grown-up, you know, having a rifle, M16 at my side with a full magazine full of ammo every single day. But on top of that, I'm getting to work with some of the funniest people on earth and do this really weird, uncommon movie that, like, I don't know, it's a movie that has no sort of, you can't be like, you know, it's like this meets that. Tropic Thunder kind of defies comparison. And once again, I was like just incredibly lucky to be there for half a year and get to watch it get made.
Very Canadian of you to have that humility, but trust me, you were an indispensable part of that movie. And speaking
Thank you.
of great comedies, I'm telling you, this is the end. I had it on my top 10 of that year. I think it's one of the funnier movies of the decade. What I'm curious about is this. It's obvious you guys have great chemistry, you and Rogan and Franco and everyone together. My curiosity is always this, when I see those movies, how much of it is ad-libbed and how much of it is on the page? Because my instinct is to say, oh, they're all buddies, so they're riffing. But then I said, no, maybe Danny McBride actually did have that all in the script and he committed it to memory and he executed it flawlessly.
It depends. It depends what's said in what movie. On that one, we had like pretty good understanding of the sort of structure of the story and how it needed to start, how it needed to continue, and how it needed to end. Now, on the way there, it was wide open to ad lib. So I'd say that like the kind of structure of the movie and the story was very much written and was understood and figured out, you know, before we shot it, as you're supposed to do with most movies. But I'd say like 80+% of the words that people say in the movie are ad libs, or we came up with on set. So it's kind of a combination of the two, and I feel compelled to mention that like ad libs also really only work if the people making them understand the scene that they're shooting in the context of the whole story. And it can't just be a guitar solo for guitar solo's sake. It has to be funny, but being funny is one box out of like 3 or 4 that need to be checked. And yeah, thank you for saying it's a very, very funny movie, because I agree. I really like that one.
Oh yeah, and the one thing about Judd too, you always get this with his movies, is that okay, fine, for some people they find it sophomoric or vulgar, but there is like genuine heart in there. Like that I always say, like, they're actually really good movies, and I'll fight to the death with anybody who disagrees with that. Judd Apatow makes excellent movies, which happen to be very funny.
I think so, and I think Seth and Evan, coming up in that school and learning so much from him, take that approach with This Is the End in a big way. I think that it's funny, but the reason why it's memorable is because you end up giving it.
Yeah.
There's plenty of things are funny. Plenty of movies have one joke that's strong or a few scenes that are strong, but those are movies you fall asleep to on the airplane. The movie that you remember and you kind of get, feel a strong connection to, and the movie you keep thinking about years later, that's one where something important happened, and the hardest guy out there needs something to affect his heart for him to give a shit about it. Simple as that.
We'll get to Celtic Soul in just a second. My kids will be very annoyed with me, Jay, if I don't ask you about How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah.
Tell me, listen, there's something about Canadians and voiceovers, right? Will Arnett's obviously a great in this arena. You've had a huge success with this. Tell me about How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah, and I've had also vague mentioning that the director of the How to Train Your Dragon movies, Dean DeBlois, is from Elmer, Quebec.
Nice.
Sheraton College graduate. It was. I was in Hawaii on the Isle of Kauai shooting Tropic Thunder when I basically got a call saying, the DreamWorks Digs doesn't hate what you're doing every day, and they'd like you to audition for this cartoon movie. And so I went in on a day off on like a Sunday, and flash forward a decade later, and I'm part of this like global franchise that is a lot of people's favorite movies of all time. So, I'll be perfectly honest. I was just like lucky enough to fall ass backwards into my Star Wars. It's been so cool because my job is to, say 5 or 6 times a year for 3 years, I go in and record for 2 hours. And then after that at the end of that 3-year period, this incredible work of art is released and my voice is in it. And, it's, means a significant amount to people across the world. And it's especially cool because I know firsthand that how much there's nothing in my adult life that I've liked as much as the stuff that I liked when I was a kid. When you're a kid and you like something, you like it with the entirety of your heart, and it means everything to you, and you remember it fondly throughout the rest of your life. In fact, it often sort of pushes you to become the adult you're going to become. And I know that I'm a part of movies that are that for a bunch of kids already, and it's really, really neat that like as the more years go by and these kids start to grow up, it just is like more and more people across the world have this movie that I'm a part of. These movies I'm a part of as real significant parts of their lives, and that's a really, really cool thing.
Speaking of significant parts of your lives, Celtic Soul, your new documentary. This is trading on your passion for soccer. Like I said, I knew the hockey stuff, but tell me all about this and where people can find this terrific documentary.
Oh, gosh. Well, thank you very much for saying it's terrific. My sort of other great sports athletic love is Glasgow Celtic Football Club. And for those who don't know, it's a very old-ass soccer team in Glasgow, Scotland, really one of Scotland's two most famous clubs. The rivalry between Glasgow Celtic and Glasgow Rangers is well, just Google it, and it's the stuff of legend and myth. And I've had a deep connection to this team for a long time, given sort of its origins and what it means to the sort of people that it means stuff to. And it was sort of, my mom's family are predominantly Irish Catholic, and this was a team that was born of the potato famine, when the streets of Glasgow were flooded with Irish immigrants fleeing famine and seeking a better life. And Celtic was a gift to them, a soccer team created by the Catholic Church to keep everybody busy and occupied and out of trouble. And to this day, it still has a profound connection to charity and to all that stuff. And it's just hard not to sort of fall in love with the romance of Celtic. And anyway, so this movie is a sort of road trip with, following me and my friend Owen O'Callaghan, soccer journalist from Ireland, and we sort of go on this road trip starting in Montreal and ending up in Glasgow. And along the way, we learn a whole bunch about the history of Celtic, as well as my family's ancestry, our story. We sort of follow this one kind of interesting thread of one of my great-granddads leaving this small town in Ireland called Westport and making his way to Canada, and then we actually get to go there. And so, anyway, it's also there's also a great deal of swearing in it because it's Owen and I in a car for days on end. But yeah, hopefully it's entertaining and good music, some good sport, love letter to the nexus of sport, culture, and history. And yeah, right now, I know in the States you can get it on iTunes.
Perfect. That's an excellent sell for it. Check out Celtic Soul on iTunes. Now it's time to get really Canadian. So, Goon 1 and 2, terrific movies. My old buddy James Duffy. So Duffy, I used to work at TSN. I went to Ryerson, and then I worked at TSN behind the scenes. So Duffy's first ever shift, he can corroborate this, I worked prompter for him, so he owes all of his considerable success to me. I want you to confirm this, Jay. Gino Reda turned down the role. Michael Landsberg turned down the role. Duffy did it, but he was a dreadful actor, and you had to save him in post. Is that true or not?
There's about 14 other old white guys you skipped over before we landed at Duffy. In fact, Duffy paid to be in the movie. No, absolutely not. James Duffy, we wrote that part for him. My writing partner Jesse and I are massive TSN fans, and he's been a significant part of our Boxing Day through New Year's traditions for the bulk of our adult lives. And for people that don't know what the hell I'm talking about, I'm talking about the World Juniors, hockey, and it's the most exciting hockey there is, in my opinion. But anyway, Duffy was kind enough to give us his time, and we got to go shoot on the TSN studio in Scarborough, which is real cool. So I wish I could give you the satisfaction of saying that we had to suffer James Duffy, but the movie's much better for it, and he was our number one choice.
Well, Michael Landsberg, I just spoke to yesterday on TSN Radio, of course, of OTR fame. He says, by the way, he's a big fan of you. I know you've done OTR before. He swears that he was offered the role first. So Landsberg is either lying or Duffy's lying. I don't know which.
I don't. That sounds like a bit of broken telephone. It might very well. Someone might have reached out to Landsberg first, but it wasn't me. Duffy. I've only had eyes for James Duffy.
I tell my buddies here in America, he's like Canada's Bob Costas. He can do it all, and obviously
he's an institution. He's an institution because he's the real actual institution that CBC and everyone else keeps trying to convince us that Don Cherry is. But James Duffy is the guy that we actually like, and is actually on in every household in the country.
All right, I want you to rank the following Canadian items: export cigarettes, coffee crisp, poutine, and Mordecai Richler?
Oh, good Lord. That's a hard one, boss. Well, you probably...
Jay's from Montreal, everybody. So if you're from Montreal, Mordecai Richler is an institution, literary icon. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd have to start with... I go Richler. Expertise are pretty great. Then Coffee Crisp, and then poutine.
You're a diehard Montreal Canadiens fan. I'd like you to rank the following 4. Number 1's going to be easy, obviously, Patrick Roy. But since you're 36, I'm also including Mats Naslund, Craig Ludwig, and Stéphane Richer.
All right. I'd have to go... I'll go Roy, Richer, Naslund, Ludwig.
I thought you'd have a soft spot for the defensive defenseman of Craig Ludwig, but that's probably accurate. And
Stéphane Richer was just like that was one of my dad's favorite players, and worth noting the last Montreal Canadien to score 50 goals in one season of hockey.
Very true, very true. And lastly, because Canadians have the funniest people: John Candy, Mike Myers, Phil Hartman, Jim Carrey. You don't have to tell me which ones you think are the best, but for personal influence or maybe a soft spot you have: John Candy, Mike Myers, Phil Hartman, Jim Carrey.
Well, John Candy, there's only ever been one, and there will never be we will never see his like again. He gets, I think, unfairly lauded in with other people sometimes, and I really think he had an energy unto himself. And there's he found a way to make being nice funny. And that's a pretty special thing. In addition to his superhuman abilities and his stature and everything, he's like a force of nature. But the really cool thing was that he found a way to make being nice funny, which is I think really, really cool and uncommon. Jim Carrey is there's nobody my age that didn't grow up watching Ace Ventura and The Mask on repeat, and so his influence cannot be overexpressed. Phil Hartman, I mean, holy crap! That was I remember when he died, and I was a kid, and that was a big one for me because as big of an SNL fan as I was and still am, an even bigger Simpsons fan, and he was somebody I was always proud to claim some degree of patriotic ownership over. Hartman is nobody did what he did, and the fact that he has as many iconic Simpsons characters as he does SNL characters is a testament to his abilities. And then Mike Myers, he's a sort of, there's an argument to be made that he's Canada's Peter Sellers, and a sincere, true artist in the craft of comedy, and someone who's always worn his roots and his culture on his sleeve, and aside from the rather ridiculous idea that the
Leafs would win the cup. Love Guru.
There would be the Leafs would win the cup like they did in Love Guru, But by the way, we could talk for 7 hours about what's wrong with the Love Guru. But I by far its greatest sin is the sort of Leafs LA final that he predicted would happen. Again, given my age, given the era that I grew up in my age, I can't overstate how important Myers is. My dad took my friends and I to see Wayne's World in the theater on my 10th birthday. So there it is.
That's wonderfully expressed. Last one for you, and I promise, Jay, thanks for being so generous with your time. Because I know you're such a big Habs fan and a hockey fan, because when people ask you the best sports movies, I always mention The Rocket, which is about Maurice Richard, and not enough people have seen it. I'm sure you've seen it. Can you just tell the audience how great it is?
It's a very, very good flick. Yeah, it's an important story. And really, really well acted, and it's a beautiful to look at. I think personally, I think the hockey could have been a bit more exciting, but True. Anyway, that's that. But I'm a bit biased when it comes to filming hockey, and what movies have done it best. But The Rocket is Roy Dupuis just basically he gets possessed by the Rocket. So it's not a performance by an actor so much as you're getting to watch somebody channeling the Rocket, and you understand why he's the Babe Ruth of hockey, and the sort of watching that movie, you get a really good sense of why the Habs aren't like any other hockey team. That most hockey teams, the sole masters that they have to answer to are victory. Right, most hockey teams, the only thing that's important is winning, and the Habs have so many cultural and political connections and ramifications to everything they do, and so it just makes for the experience of being a Habs fan a very weighty one, and you get a really good sense of that in the Rocket.
The talented and very funny Jay Baruchel, $1 Million Baby, Tropic Thunder, Goon 1 and 2, How to Train Your Dragon, This Is the End, and Celtic Soul, currently available on iTunes. Tremendous stuff here on Cinephile, man. Hopefully, one day you come to ESPN, we can actually break bread and have some poutine together. But thanks so much for the time, man. I really appreciate it.
I look forward to it, bud. Thank you so much for having me. Nice to meet you.